A hearty good morning to everyone. Wonderful to connect again for inspiration and wisdom in our virtual auditorium. Welcome to Mill Park Business School's March 2021 broadcast in our Tomorrow is Beautiful webinar series with the topic Whistleblowing, to tell or not to tell, presented by our special guest, Brett Hamilton. Brett is director at First River Capital, a boutique finance company that specializes in strategy, corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, buyouts, and private equity. And Brett consults on strategy, finance, and governance. And he has gained extensive entrepreneurial experience in media, FMCG, agriculture, and property development. Brett is also a visiting faculty member at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, where he teaches corporate finance on the MBA program. He co-developed executive academic programs in management at USB and Yale University School of Management, and also facilitates classes for various schools in South Africa and abroad. Brett holds an MBA cum laude from USB and further completed the Senior Management Development Program at USB Ed. He's a certified empowerment technician, a member of the Institute of Directors in South Africa, and he's completed a postgraduate diploma in applied ethics at Stellenbosch University and also completed an executive development program at Stern School of Business at the New York University in advanced valuations, and a program on data science and business analytics at McComb School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. Or Houston. I'm never sure how to pronounce that, but it's in Texas. Colleagues, and Brett, thank you for spending time with us this morning, and we're so looking forward to your insights on the very contemporary topic of whistleblowing. So, colleagues, Brett, we're going to present now, and then when he's done, we will deal with the questions and answers. At the bottom of your screen, there is a space there that you can click the button on questions, that you can post your questions there, that we will deal with after Brett has taken us and walked us through this very contemporary topic. Brett, without any further ado, I'm handing over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kobus, and welcome to all the participants. I'm very glad to see so many people joining us this morning. It is my immense privilege to present on this topic today. It is something that I care deeply about and that I know a little bit about. So I want to caveat at the very start of this session that I don't know everything. And this is simply going to serve as a guide and just to start a conversation. And I think it's something good to talk about. So I want to thank every one of you who are attending, who obviously also feel passionate about this subject. I want to thank Mill Park Business School also for this opportunity, and everyone in the background who has made this possible. So if we go to the first slide, you will see that we're going to talk. Basically, the session is broad because this is an initial discussion. And we're going to ask a fundamental question. Is there a legitimate moral reason for or against whistleblowing? So you may be posed, or a colleague or a friend may be posed with an opportunity to blow the whistle on some illegitimate or illegal activity. And the question then is, what should I do? That's fundamentally what we are concerned about. Now, the problem with this is there are many factors at play here. So number one, we need to first define what is whistleblowing and what is the role that it fulfills within society. What is the desired role that it plays? What does it play? And how does that impact my decision of whether I should blow the whistle or not? We will talk about motivation, which is an underlying factor of whistleblowing. Why do we blow the whistle, or why should we or should we not? And the impact that whistleblowing has, meaning why is it important? Naturally, if whistleblowing is something that is good, or we are of the opinion that it is something that should be done, naturally we need to protect those who blow the whistle. And we're going to look at some of the protections available to whistleblowers, but then also look at the reality of whistleblowing, because policies does not always equal practice. And then finally, we will look at certain ways of approaching this complex problem. should I blow the whistle or not? Which fundamentally boils down to not so much a rule or regulation motivation, but more a moral motivation. And unfortunately, there are so many interests at play that interact with each other. Invariably, there's going to be conflict of interests, which means you may want to do something, but it may create harm or cause harm. You may not want to do something, and that may also cause harm. So the idea here is to address, or at least touch on, start exploring the moral dilemma that our whistleblowers do face. So just before we move on to the next slide, I just want to say that I am not a legal expert. So this does not form part of any legal advice. This is merely a guide, a conversation, and hopefully it gives you some insight into this topic. So the question is, do I tell or do I not tell? And first thing that we're going to look at is, what is whistleblowing? So on the next slide, we have a sort of a definition here, but I want to put it forward to you that there are many definitions. And unfortunately for this, I know we are at an academic institution, so I shouldn't say unfortunately, but unfortunately, academia is full of different definitions. So it is important for us to understand, first of all, the fact that whistleblowing is struggled to be or difficult to define is problem number one for a potential whistleblower, because you need to know, am I blowing the whistle or am I simply gossiping? Am I simply causing trouble? Am I raising a grievance, or am I officially or legitimately blowing the whistle? And that is a very important topic. This confusion as to what it is leads to uncertainty for whistleblowers that is a factor that perhaps prevent whistleblowing from occurring. In any case, let's try to define it. Probably the most prevalent definition is that whistleblowing is those who, or whistleblowers, those who disclose information on illegal or unethical practices within organizations to parties either internal to the company or organization or external who can take action. So I want to make it very clear here that in this definition, it is someone within an organization who is a whistleblower, who has identified a legitimate illegal or unethical practice, and who reports this to someone or something that can take action against this. So what is very important here is that there needs to be impact. It needs to be value adding. It is not just water cooler talk. It is not you mouthing off to colleagues. It is not you complaining to friends and family. Whistleblowing is a deliberate action in order to bring about change. So that is number one. What's very important to understand is that you must report to those who can take action. Now, this can relate to public and private organizations. So obviously government institutions, whistleblowing can happen there. And it is also for companies. Okay. It can also be other organizations like not-for-profits or schools or churches or stuff like that. For our purpose, we're obviously here at a business school. So my discourse is going to be very much focused on company or business environment, with some mention here and there of political or social issues. And that relates to the first point mentioned here on the slide. Whistleblowing can relate to a single event. So for example, you see an employee taking cash from the till and putting it into the pocket, and you address this. However, what we're going to see next is it is also sometimes forming part of a systemic change or a systemic system, meaning a social system. And that is pertinent to understand because it speaks to the motives of whistleblowing. So what are the narratives that we tell ourselves with whistleblowing? Well, on the one hand, for people who don't like illegal or illicit or unethical behavior, whistleblowers are seen to be heroes, people who should be celebrated, people who should be protected, behavior that should be encouraged. However, like I just said, Whistleblowing sometimes also forms part of a systemic process. We'll talk about that a little bit later if you don't understand what I mean. But this systemic process means whistleblowing against something, the way that we do things, whether it be in a company or in an economy or in the social sphere. Whistleblowing attempts to change something about how things are being done. And that means it is a challenge to the way that things are done. So the narrative there then would be whistleblowers are troublemakers. Whistleblowers are radical. Whistleblowers are activists, meaning there's a negative narrative being thrown towards whistleblowing and whistleblowers. They are vilified. They are seen as people who don't conform, don't fit in. And if you are perhaps not aware that the behavior that they are blowing the whistle against is illegal or unethical, you may not agree with what they are doing. You may vilify them. Okay. So on the next slide, the question then that we have to ask, is whistleblowing important? So first of all, for a company, let's keep it nice and simple at the start. Why is whistleblowing important? Why should it be seen as something positive? Why should it be seen as something that we should protect, we should encourage, and why should we protect our whistleblowers? Well, number one, it has as its goal, or it has the ability at least, to stop current unethical or illegal practices, and perhaps through recourse, the ramifications of whistleblowing, meaning the outcomes of whistleblowing, prevent future wrongdoing. Okay. Now, for a company, surely that sounds like a good thing to occur. It sounds like that is what we want in an organization. And this speaks to the reputation of the organization and the ability of an organization to develop a trusting relationship with its stakeholders, to prevent wrongdoing, to prevent harm, to do things to the benefit of society. And if that is not occurring, surely it is best for those practices that are doing harm, that's not to the benefit, that is wasteful, that is illegal and unethical, to be exposed. And whistleblowing forms a key action in order to be able to do that. There are other ways of exposing it. However, whistleblowing is sort of a direct approach of addressing wrongdoing. So it really does speak to the corporate governance and the processes of control within an organization. Compliance. Do we comply with the way that we want things to be done within an organization? Whether it be from a legal perspective or a rules-based approach within the organization. Point here being, an organization needs a certain level of control. And if things are being done that goes against that control, you would want it to be exposed. It is a valuable feedback tool. Without it, the organization is running blind. So they don't know, is there wrong things happening within the organization? Are we perhaps not as efficient or effective or as good to society as we may want to be through wrongdoing? So it is a way very much of a company putting a finger on the pulse. That means it ensures that those who should be held accountable for their actions are. And that, from a corporate governance point of view, is, and if you look at frameworks like King, that is what it is all about. Assigning responsibility, holding people to account, ensuring that the things that we want to have done happens the way that we want it. So that is within a company. And I think that is enough of a focus on a company perspective to say why whistleblowing is important to have in society. However, it goes a little bit broader than this. It also has a place in moral leadership. And this is sometimes called network whistleblowing. So this is basically whistleblowing that goes against a system. So not a particular action, individual action as such, but more a system. So it will go against, as an example, financial power. We have here an example like the Panama Papers. The Panama Papers is coming from an unknown source. We don't know who blew the whistle there, but it relates to tax evasion activities with global organizations around the world and governments. It exposed a lot of corporate wrongdoing. Okay. And what you can see here, it is taking on financial power. Another example is Julian Assange, who founded WikiLeaks, or at least was made available the information, a lot of the information that started WikiLeaks in 2006. And here it allows people to be anonymous sources to expose wrongdoing as it relates to sort of corporate but also government wrongdoing. So some very controversial topics that has been exposed on WikiLeaks. Number one was the leak of the military manual of Guantanamo Bay, where potential or suspected terrorists were housed post 9/11. And another one is exposing civilian killings during war. In this case, it was just one of the cases. It was the American military who targeted, not necessarily intentionally, but it wasn't made public, civilians in the Iraq war. So there are many of these examples. And what you can see here, this takes on military power and to a certain extent political power. It takes on the system. Another example is Kiriakou and Hickman, who wrote a book, The Convenient Terrorists. And this is from their experience of blowing the whistle against CIA practices. So, for example, they exposed the lengths at which the CIA would take to gain information from witnesses. And this included torture. And then finally, we can talk about media power. Not necessarily taking on media power, that is definitely the case. But we can just think of the example of media within South Africa who could not report on apartheid and the atrocities that were undertaken during that time. However, as we got late in the later years, 1970s and 80s, the media took a stance against this. Media started reporting on the atrocities, and their sources started giving information to them, whistleblowing against the government's practices. So what I want to make clear here is you can see that whistleblowing also plays a role in keeping power, social structures in check. And this takes on financial power, military power, political and media power. Okay, so from a social aspect, from a broader structure of society perspective, but also from a company perspective. Naturally, companies are also structures within society, and they need to be kept in check, the activities that you have in there. So we can see that whistleblowing is quite important. The question then on the next slide is, should you whistleblow? Is it expected of you to blow the whistle? If it is so good, if it performs or forms such an integral part of informing society of what is truly happening, exposing truths, stopping wrongdoing, surely this is something that must be done. And if we look at just in South Africa, the amount of legislation that is there to protect whistleblowers, let's just go through the list. I'm not going to give you too much of it, too much information on this. The Constitution has specific clauses that should, in the event of harassment and these sort of things after whistleblowing, protects the whistleblower. The Protected Disclosures Act is a very important act for whistleblowing. It is also sometimes called, in quotation mark, the Whistleblowing Act. We will have an in-depth look at this in a few slides. But here, this act was particularly set up to protect whistleblowers from workplace harassment post-whistleblowing. There's the Labor Relations Act in terms of recourses that you can take when you are being harassed or being treated unethically in your workplace. There is the Companies Act. Section 159 in the Companies Act protects, to a certain extent, applies to the protection of whistleblowers. And then you have stuff like the Protection Against Harassment Act. Now, none of these acts are perfect necessarily. There are many more also. And then if we look at professional bodies, many or most professional bodies have ethical codes that you as a professional must comply with or adhere to. If you don't, you are not part of that professional body. So the key here is to understand that internal processes of the business, what that means is reporting structures that allow for whistleblowing. We'll have a look at what those are a little bit later. Professional body ethical codes, and then legislation. All are there, have been brought forward, developed in order to promote whistleblowing. So in that sense, it is perhaps fair, or at this point in time, fair to say that it is expected of someone to blow the whistle. Wrongdoing is generally defined or understood. There are protections in place to protect those who do, which means we expect you to do so and we will protect you when you do. So if we look at the next slide, the question then is, why would people not blow the whistle? Okay, and this is an interesting one, because what we see is that, first of all, legislation and rules and internal processes are not perfect. They will never prevent all types of harm that could befall a whistleblower. And what we see is that policies, laws, even rules, how they are applied or how they are interpreted in practice is not always the same. So just some business examples here. This is from a study that had to do with academic research, or sorry, not academic and scientific research in healthcare. But basically, I just use this as an example because the percentages are nice. It was easily available, but many studies have found similar. So after blowing the whistle, what type of, well, let's put it in brackets then for a lack of a better word, reward can you expect? The message here perhaps that I want to convey is don't expect a big thank you. So 12% of whistleblowers said that they were fired after blowing the whistle. 12% said that their contracts were not renewed. 12% said that they were denied increases because of blowing the whistle. 7% were denied promotions. 40% faced counter allegations, meaning, yeah, but you know, you did this. And those counter allegations were not always, in most part, not true. But basically you were smeared, your reputation was smeared. And 25% were ostracized within their work team, within their business company, or even in their industry. So what we see here is that the ramifications, the outcome, the consequence of whistleblowing may be positive for having the exposed wrongdoing. However, the whistleblower is not always better off afterwards. I've just used some examples on the right here. Julian Assange right on top. So WikiLeaks. And what we know is that he has been in prison numerous times. He's been censured, meaning it's not a positive outcome for this gentleman. And the ongoing case for having him, legal cases made against him in multiple jurisdictions is ongoing. We have another example here, Daphne Galicia. Daphne Galicia was part of an investigation. She's a prominent journalist, blogger, and activist in Malta, and she was investigating and helping with an investigation into wrongdoing that was exposed with the Panama Papers, and she was assassinated. So we want to make it very clear here that whistleblowing has significant consequences. I mean, we usually talk about losing a job, losing income, or being looked over for promotion, but it can be as bad as losing your life. In some South African cases, I'm not going to go into this too in depth, but we have Bianca Goodson from Trillion exposing corruption within South Africa. We have Suzanne Daniels, who exposed wrongdoing within Eskom. And if we look at those cases, they were not, they were sort of vilified for their actions. not only within the organizations for which they blew the whistle, but also in broader society. And there are many reasons for this. And it goes down to our idea of, should you tell? So is it okay to tell on someone? And if you think of how we are raised, what society expects of us. Number one, in South Africa, we were raised in an environment where you do not question authority. You do not question the government. You do not question the military. You do not question the police. You do not tell on your friends in kindergarten. So it has to be made clear here that from a very young age and within society, those structures are put in place to say, you know, it's not good to blow the whistle. But what we need to develop is a culture of saying it is the good and right thing to do. However, I think it's very clear here that the consequences sometimes can be dire. So we need to leave the door open a little bit. And we will talk about that in a few minutes. On the next slide, then I asked, should we care about this? Does it matter? Yeah, you know, it happens somewhere else. It doesn't happen with me. Well, here is a survey conducted by the Ethics Institute, the good people at the Ethics Institute. They conduct a survey, I think it's every 3 years, asking companies about ethical practices, ethical concerns within their organization. The report is available online. Sorry, I didn't put the link in here. I should have. That was an oversight on my part. But let's look at what they found in their latest report in 2019. So first of all, I think this is 19 organizations that they surveyed, all employees within the organization across different industries. And what they asked was, well, one of the questions was, have you personally observed unethical behavior in the last year? And 31% of respondents said they had personally observed unethical behavior. This is up from 14% from the 2013 report. So there's been an increase in observations of unethical behavior. Then the question is asked, did you report this unethical behavior? And the result was 55% did. Now, that's a quite high percentage. That's nice to see. But it is down from 64% if we look at the 2013 report. So what we are seeing is a rise of witnessing unethical behavior and a steady decline. The 2016 finding was 64. I think it was then 60 and now 55. So what we're seeing is a reduction in reporting of unethical behavior. And then they asked a very important question. Tell us why you didn't report. And number one reason, about 30 to 40% of respondents said, I was afraid that I would be victimized at work. This means if I was protected in some way, I would have been encouraged to blow the whistle, but I fear that I will be victimized. Number two, same high level of respondents. I did not believe that anything would be done. Now, guys, this is a very important one, such a crucial one. The consequences or the outcomes of a whistleblowing action against the unethical behavior. First of all, that unethical behavior or illegitimate behavior needs to be addressed. The whistleblower needs to see that what they have done is acted upon, that it matters, that the company will do something about it and be informed what has been done about it. If nothing happens, whistleblowing will dwindle within your organization, within your culture. So that's a very important one to realize or keep note of. And last one, I did not believe I could report anonymously. So again, it speaks to protection. I want to report anonymously, and I feared for my safety. So we can see here, number one, whistleblowers need to be protected because they fear the repercussions of their actions. And number two, there needs to be action, visible or transparent action for whistleblowing, to encourage whistleblowing. Okay. So how will you be protected? What does the law say? On the next slide, we have a look at just some of the legislation. And I don't want to bore you too much with this slide. There's a lot written on it. But let me give you the summary. We've had a look, or I've listed at least some of the legal protections that you are afforded, the legal rights that you have under the Constitution, under some of the acts. such as the Companies Act. But the primary document that will protect you is the PDA. Okay? It was founded in 2001 and very positively adapted or updated in 2017. And the goal of this document is to avoid occupational detriment. What this means is when you blow the whistle, you must be protected and not face dismissal, suspension, disciplinary hearings for your whistleblowing action. You must not be refused promotion. You must not be transferred against your will, and you must not face intimidation. What is very good about our PDA is that in many ways it aligns with global standards. I've used Transparency International in my analysis to say what is good and what is bad or what can be improved. But basically the suggestions of Transparency International sets forth a sort of a wish list of how should whistleblowing be legitimately or through legal processes protected. In South Africa, the PDA applies to both public and private organizations, which is very good. And it offers remedies. What this means is if the PDA is transgressed against you as a whistleblower, the PDA provides for compensation to ensure restoration. So you can approach the CCMA or the Labour Court in order to address the possible occupational detriment that you have faced. However, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and where uncertainty may reign for whistleblowers. What is a protected act? So not all things that you say is necessarily protected under the PDA. So it must be a protected disclosure. So first of all, the behavior that you are reporting on must be improper. So it must be a criminal offense, or it must be or represent a failure to comply with legal obligations. It must represent a miscarriage of justice. There must be health or safety concerns involved, or it must represent damage to the environment, unfair discrimination, or concealment of these. So what's very clear here, certain things tick the box of what can be a protected disclosure, others do not. Now, guys, this ticking of boxes makes it very difficult for a whistleblower or a potential whistleblower to know, is it right of me to blow the whistle? Should I do it? And two, will I be protected? Now, if you are already worried about the outcomes of this process, will I be vilified or victimized in some way? Not being certain if you're going to be protected is a major deterrent for potential whistleblowers. In addition to the behavior that must be improper, it must be made in good faith. You need to look at your internal motivations. What is the reason I am making this disclosure? It cannot be for personal gain. It cannot be to get a promotion. So, for example, you cannot blow the whistle against your manager if your motivation is to have your manager fired so that you can get a promotion to be the manager. You guys are getting that, no? It must be made in good faith. So what is clear here is that you need to understand what is motivating you to blow the whistle and what it will be perceived as from others. Finally, you must follow the correct procedure. We'll talk about that procedure. It's just about who you go to blow the whistle. You can't go to anybody. So on the next slide, I just look at the how a little bit. And the how is basically you can go to a legal advisor for advice. In this case, the PDA protects the client-lawyer privilege, which means you are in a protected space when you talk to your lawyer about the potential whistleblowing that you want to undertake. You can blow the whistle to your employer, the public protector, auditor generals, ministers or MECs under certain conditions or circumstances, or technically anybody else who has the ability to do something about it. This will then fall under a general protected disclosure. Again, there's just protocol to follow. And the problem is, if you don't follow the protocol, you are not going to be protected under the PDA. Now, this again poses a bit of a problem because of that uncertainty. Am I going to be protected when I blow the whistle? Is this something that I should be blowing the whistle on? Those are questions that you're going to grapple with, in addition to all the other things that you may be uncertain about during whistleblowing. So if I look on the next slide, I'm just going to finalize then my takeaway on the concerns with the PDA. What we see is two things. The PDA is there in good faith in terms of wanting to protect whistleblowers. All the other acts and the Constitution is also there to encourage whistleblowing and to protect whistleblowing. So it can be expected to whistleblow. However, what we have seen is that the outcomes of whistleblowing often leads to harm against the whistleblowers. So what this means is there are silencing activities there by people who perhaps are involved in some way within the wrongdoing, who wants to silence the whistleblowers. So how do we make the PDA better? I'm not criticizing the PDA. I'm simply saying that from a whistleblower's perspective, it would be good if there was greater clarity in terms of what justifies whistleblowing and what does not, and how or what the process is to whistleblow. So, for example, just to give you a practical example of this, a grievance is not whistleblowing. Complaining or reporting bad behavior or a grievance that was done against you as a person, as an employee, by your manager, as an example, to HR, that is not whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is not necessarily motivated with I have been harmed. It is greater society. So it is you seeing wrongdoing. A colleague taking money out of the till is not doing direct harm to you. It is harm to the business and harm to society. And this is then whistleblowing. So it's not a grievance procedure. Just be aware of that. Secondly, the PDA does not necessarily have a direct mechanism to ensure confidentiality. We saw confidentiality is a great requirement for whistleblowers. So it would be nice if confidentiality was actually written, or at least a mechanism for confidential whistleblowing was written into the Act. Secondly, a broader definition of what whistleblowing encompasses. We have a list of types of things, like criminal offense and these sort of things, that conforms with whistleblowing. However, overseas we see statements in the law that says harm to society also conforms to whistleblowing, an act of whistleblowing. What this means is if you see anything that you believe will cause harm to society, you can be protected under the law. That is a broader definition. It gives you greater certainty that your action will be protected under the law. It speaks to employees of the company. It would be nice if this is made a little bit broader. It has already in 2017 been made broader to include contractors, outside parties, third parties. However, it does not necessarily help people who assisted the whistleblower, or perhaps their extended family, or people who may be impacted by the consequences of whistleblowing. So this could be a positive step. Secondly, it doesn't outline proactive steps undertaken by the company to protect the whistleblower. It says if the whistleblower is harmed, they must be restored, but there's not active prescribed things in order to protect the whistleblowers proactively prior to whistleblowing as such. And then finally, the PDA requires of companies to have an internal reporting mechanism. The only problem with this is, how is this being regulated in practice? How is this being put into action? And sometimes we see a disconnect between the, let's call it the spirit of the law, and what we actually see in practice in order to protect the whistleblower. So having spoken now, if we go to the next slide, to sort of the legal aspects of it, and we've seen the harm that happens, we come to the crux of our discussion, the moral dilemma. Because you are going to see something that is wrong. You are going to look at the laws, and it may tell you that this is a legitimate thing that should be reported. You know what process to follow. The question that you still need to ask, should I blow the whistle? So there are a few things that we need to look at here. Number one, it is expected of you to do so. So sometimes companies expect of you, meaning you have a duty to blow the whistle, or you have a responsibility to do so. However, to whom do you have the duty? Sure, an employee has its primary duty towards the company and indirectly its shareholders. But The Companies Act and King makes it clear that you as an employee must act to the best benefit of the company. So your duty and responsibility lies towards the company. However, there's a conflict here because surely you have a duty to yourself to protect yourself from harm. Surely you have a duty towards protecting your family or your colleagues. So we see there is a conflict here. So guys, it's very difficult to say there's a duty and a responsibility to blow the whistle, because that tells you must do it. There's a rule to follow and you must follow this rule. And the problem is, what if I follow the rule and it brings harm? Can I always follow this rule? Is it right or fair to force someone to do something if it will bring harm? So this brings into question the whole concept of it is a duty. I've spoken now about the outcomes. So let's talk about the consequences. Let's look at the consequences of whistleblowing. And obviously the cost must be worth, or it must be less than the benefit that is gained. But to whom's benefit? Who must gain from this? Is it consequences only towards me? What about the consequences to the company? I may want to protect the reputation of the company, so I won't blow the whistle. I may want to protect the reputation of an admired colleague who did something wrong, perhaps someone who was your mentor. What do? I may say, okay, I'm not going to blow the whistle because of that. I may want to protect my family. I may want to protect my career. You have a right, the freedom to have a career. This is in contrast, perhaps, sometimes to the duty that you have to blow the whistle. I can talk about this for ages. So the idea here just is, if you're going to blow the whistle, what are the consequences going to be? How severe is it going to be? What will the impact be? And if I do not blow the whistle, what will those consequences be? And surely, if we look at a values perspective, if we look at the value of freedom, the freedom of expression, the freedom to be autonomous, to make the decision yourself and be your own person in terms of deciding, if I have a duty, to whom do I have that duty? And is it okay to not live up to that duty because the consequences of blowing the whistle may cause more harm than good? Now, this does not mean that you have to always protect. What I'm just saying is you have the freedom to make up your own mind. So you have loyalty, perhaps. I have loyalty towards my company. I have loyalty towards my colleagues. I have loyalty towards my family. Who do I protect here? So what you see is there's just, the stuff that I've mentioned now, it's just a mess. People can tell you that you must have a virtuous ethics. You must be courageous. But courageous means what? Courageous doesn't tell you what to do. Being courageous may mean blow the whistle and take the consequences. But it may also be keep quiet and take those consequences or accept those consequences. So sort of ethical frameworks, when we look at them in isolation, if we look at the duty perspective, rules-based, if we look at the consequences perspective, meaning cost benefit, and if we look at the virtuous aspect of it, do what is right, do what is courageous, act responsibly. No one really tells you what that is. Is it being responsible to blow the whistle? Or is it being responsible not to blow the whistle? It can be argued either way. So I want to make it very clear here that we're sitting with an ethical dilemma in terms of deciding what should we do? In whose interest should I make this decision? Whose interests should I protect, if any? And how do I weigh up those different outcomes? Okay, so if we go to my last slide, sorry for going a little bit over time, but I'll make this quick. These are the types of things that you have to consider. Oh, sorry, just the second last slide. My apologies. We can skip the last one. Guys, if you want to blow the whistle, be sure that there is a case to be made. Examine your motives. It must be selfless. Can you verify what you have seen? Don't go blow the whistle if you can't prove it. So you need to gather evidence in order to back up your claim. Okay, it's going to be hearsay otherwise. Determine the process to follow. Seek legal advice if you have to. You're protected under the law for that. And be aware, finally, that you may not be thanked for this activity. So my final, if we go to the last slide, my final takeaway from this discussion is then this. Just to the last slide. Okay. Number one, it would be nice if we have broader range of legal protections under our laws. So defining what whistleblowing is, broader. Methods available to report, broader. And we need stronger laws to limit harassment. What can a company then do? And this is my final takeaway. From a legal perspective, that's cool. But what can a company do? Number one, you need to have clear guidelines in terms of the mechanisms that must be followed within an organization, and the employees must be aware of what those mechanisms are. They must trust in the whistleblowing internal processes of an organization. Number two, you need to develop a culture of whistleblowing. What this means is there should be a culture of when I see something wrong, I need to act upon it. You need to develop clear and strong reporting processes. I've mentioned that. And the tone is set at the top. Basically, what it comes down to, you need to promote whistleblowing through both your processes, but also developing a committed culture, an ethical culture that prefers whistleblowing over not whistleblowing, that puts the requirement to report above the requirement to remain silent. Okay, there was much more that I could have said there, but I've run out of time, so my apologies for that. I am handing over back to Kobus. I think. Or maybe I should just go through the questions myself. Maybe there's a connectivity issue. Okay, so let me take some of the questions that we've got. The first question, can I just check? Okay, Suraya, you guys can still hear me now, so there's not a connectivity issue on my side. It just seems like we've lost some people on Moltbach, but it's okay. As long as the participants can still hear me, we're going ahead. Can I just get an indication on the chat room that you guys can hear me? Okay, so here is a question. Is it true that in most instances, the whistleblowers are those who were part of the corrupt deals? They end up blowing the whistle because they are not receiving what was due to them. That's not necessarily the case. I'm not sure who asked the question. I don't know the structure here, but definitely not. In most cases, whistleblowing is not necessarily by those who are involved. It is someone who witnessed something. In some cases, it is people who are involved. And it could just be that someone has decided that this is now the right thing to do. You have to understand, whistleblowing does not exonerate you from any responsibility of a wrongful action. So I want to make it very clear here that if you were part of corrupt deals and you don't get what is due to you, and that is your motivation to blow the whistle, first of all, that doesn't fall under the definition of whistleblowing, because your motive is not selfless in this case. You're doing it out of greed or vengeance. That's not whistleblowing. But let's talk about it a bit more fundamentally. If you are aggrieved because you didn't get your slice of the pie, you're basically admitting that you did something wrong with other people. And this makes it very difficult for you to say that you were innocent. So you don't necessarily see a lot of that happening. You mostly see it where people have reached the end of their tether. Basically, I am involved in this and I do no longer want to be involved with this. So a lot of whistleblowers, most whistleblowers, remember, they're going to suffer harm from this. It can even be bodily harm. It could be physical harm. It could be your friends and family being harmed. To do so is usually not from a vengeance perspective. Kobus, are you back? Do you want to field the questions for me, or
Oh, there we
continue?
go.
Okay.
Brett, I'm back. Sorry,
No
I
worries.
was not away physically.
Okay.
I had an ESCOM challenge again,
Okay. No worries.
but anyway, sorry, but
It
I
is
managed to
okay.
get back and follow you very clearly. Just want to say thank you so much for yeah. I mean, there's so many things running through my own head, and as you were talking, I don't know, I was thinking of that one Einstein quote that said, if I were to remain silent, I'd be guilty of complicity.
Yes, that's also it. Yeah.
But you know, when you spoke about why people don't blow the whistle, you know, and you provided those stats on people getting fired, contracts not renewed, they denied access, denied promotions, ostracized, you know, so all those reasons for not reporting, you know, really is also, yeah, it's, I don't know, I must find the right word to fit in there. But for me, it's a deep concern that, you know, that happens to people. But, you know, you really unpacked it very nicely about the distinction we need to make between whistleblowing. It's not a grievance, you know, it's definitely not the same thing, and how important it is later on in the discussion of evidence, you know, if you decide to do that. But the crux then is that moral, ethical dilemma, you know, should I blow the whistle? And of course the conflict. And as you were talking, you know, many things run through through my own head, and trying to put myself in the position of people that you referred to as examples early, you know, in the beginning of the discussion, and asking oneself the question, what would I have done? You know, would I have taken that kind of step? And the questions, and thanks so much for already covering in the questions. The first one, I don't know the second one there, Brett, if you've already dealt with the one.
Doctor, I can take it. It's a good question. It's a good question. We'll see how far we go for the next 8 minutes. But basically the question is here, how do we distinguish between whistleblowing and simply rumors or gossip as an organization now? And this is an important one. The thing is, like I said, there must be evidence for it. The motive must be clear, but also the company should have a official internal reporting structure, which means even if it is something like a suggestion box or a whistleblowing box, the thing is, if that protocol is followed, an investigation should follow any accusation that is made. And a company then has to determine if this is a legitimate whistleblowing case or not. So that needs to be made clear from the company. But a company shouldn't ignore any activity from employees that attempts to blow the whistle. If it happens to turn out to be hearsay, then nothing can be done about it, but the employee who blew the whistle needs to then be informed about that. We'll talk about informing at the bottom here. So it's very important to understand the internal process, and the company needs to use that internal process to determine the legitimacy of the claims that are being made. Okay. There's a very good question that follows up on this. How should whistleblowers be informed or updated? Now, again, June, you gave a very nice response here. June knows, I'm going to say it now, June knows more than I do. But the PDA makes it very clear. There are certain expectations set forth by the PDA in terms of what feedback should be given to the whistleblower. And I think there's actually a time limit put on it in terms of 21 days. I read that somewhere. So the claim should be investigated. The whistleblower should be informed that it is being investigated. The outcome of that investigation must be reported to that employee, and then obviously any subsequent sort of activities, major milestones, must be reported to that employee. It's very important that transparency is key here. It mustn't just go into a big black box and then you don't know what the outcome is, because what you will see is perhaps inaction or what is perceived as inaction, but there may be valid and legitimate reasons why the company did not act. Or secondly, perhaps they did act, but you weren't aware of these actions. So somebody could have been given a formal warning, a written warning about the activity. You're not aware of it, so you think nothing has happened. So I think from both sides, transparency is required from an employee perspective, but also the company must know to develop a culture of reporting. Transparency is also required from their point of view. Yeah, so you must be informed of the investigation that is being undertaken and how that investigation is progressing. Yes. How can corporations' policies adequately protect whistleblowers against cases of intimidation and being silenced? Policies, well, obviously, having anonymous tip-off lines instead of making it public, that is one way. Naturally, at some point, the anonymity may fall by the wayside, meaning if there's a court case, it's quite possible that your name will become public, if that makes sense. However, I don't know of any company policy specifically that provides an ironclad protection in this sense. However, that's why I said the PDA must be proactive in protecting employees. What the PDA currently does is you're going to suffer harm perhaps, and there's recourse against that harm, meaning once you have suffered harm, you can be restored. You can be paid perhaps for loss of income, etc., etc. However, or you can make a civil case against the person who is harassing you. But that is not being proactive. That is in retrospect. And that is something that if we want to encourage whistleblowing, that is definitely something that we need to address going forward. How can corporations' policies promote and encourage people to whistleblow? Is it perhaps a case of changing the view? Yes. So number one, you can see in my slide number one, there was a little, if you're a Harry Potter fan, a little snitch. The narrative that we are telling ourselves. We have to make it clear that number one, whistleblowing is not a bad thing. It is not a tattletale. You are reporting for the betterment of society. You are trying to avoid wrongdoing. That is extremely important to understand. And that narrative needs to be conveyed in the organization. Now, how do you do this? Well, number one, you need structured and informed policies and public policy, meaning, visible policies, known by the employees of how to whistleblow, so that they don't make mistakes, so that they don't confuse a grievance with whistleblowing, as an example. Secondly, you want to protect anonymity as much as possible. You want to inform employees about the process as much as possible. And companies may want to assist employees with the process of whistleblowing from a legal perspective. Naturally, this is tough if the company is the person who, or the entity against which the whistle is being blown. Then you have recourse outside. You can go to third parties, follow the process of the PDA. But it is a cultural thing, how a company perceives internal reporting, how a company perceives someone who speaks up against wrong, how people perceive that is a cultural and societal issue. And we need to change the narrative. And that's part of why I am discussing what I'm discussing. We need to change the narrative to make whistleblowing a positive thing. Okay. Let's go on to the next one there. Sorry if I'm not answering these questions adequately. I'm trying my best. Well, look, the scale of whistleblowing is not necessarily at issue here. So what is the scale of the whistleblowing that it will bring down a company like the case of Enron, Tungard, Hewlett, and Steinhoff? It's not necessarily the scale that is an issue here. It can be a single person doing it. The issue is if it's a large-scale corruption or wrongdoing, it may take a long time to unravel. So the impact of your whistleblowing may not be visible at the start. And secondly, who you report to may also be involved. And this is a big one. So a lot of companies have whistleblowing hotlines. They have HR that is trained in welcoming whistleblowers to whistleblow, meaning how to handle it, how to deal with it. But what we see a lot with companies, and where I consult on governance, is employees prefer to go to like the internal auditing function. So they go to the accountants of the company to blow the whistle because they perceive it as a more trustworthy avenue. It is the wrong avenue because internal auditors are not trained professionally to deal with whistleblowing. They are not trained with the people side of it, how to handle the complexity of the ethical dilemma that these persons are facing. But you can see now how if I don't trust my boss, if I don't trust his boss, if I don't trust the internal system, if I don't believe that the anonymous hotline is really anonymous, then I will rather follow a different avenue or simply keep quiet. But a single tip-off, a single whistleblower can unravel a massive web of corruption. I want to make that very clear. One person can make all the difference. I think it's not necessary, Jabulani, thank you for this question. The thing is, given all these issues raised, how do we encourage people to blow the whistle knowing the consequences? Number one, try to avoid the consequences. So I think what is very important here is to know what the consequences are. A company must be aware of this, and then they must have systems and processes, proactive, that will protect against those harms. Because no one can be expected to blow the whistle because of their duty towards something or someone else and then face harm. You can see how, from an ethical point of view, I can't expect that from you. Jabulani, I can't tell you you must then do this. What I can, however, do is encourage you to do so. By doing what? Helping you or preventing those consequences. So I think an honest discussion needs to be had in companies of what are the real consequences of whistleblowing and how do we ensure and communicate to our employees that they are at least in some way protected against those harms, that they are not out there on their own. That's very important. Let's see. So, yes, so the last comment here is just culture is important. That's cool. I mentioned that. Does it matter when the disclosure is made? Can people request protection even if they made their disclosures before the act came into effect? Oof. This is Unati. That is a very particular question, and I don't know what the answer is for that. You should be protected under the act. It is when the action is undertaken. So when you blow the whistle, you are now currently protected under the act. So any former sort of activity, it is not the actual corruption that is protected under the act. It is the whistleblowing action that is protected under the act. So from my point of view, with my limited knowledge, I would think that it is the act that is protected. So it is about when you'd make the disclosure. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I sometimes... Can we go on for one more minute, perhaps? Let me just check if I can answer this last question.
Sure, please do, Brett, please.
Let me just check. There's one more question here. To what extent can you whistleblow? As sometimes you get intimidation cases not dealt with, sometimes company or... Okay. Guys, I'm going to say something controversial here. But it was told to me by someone who knows about the subject matter quite a bit. He's a professor in ethics also. If you blow the whistle or if you want to blow the whistle and you know for a fact nothing is going to be done about it, meaning there's not going to be any positive impact on society with you blowing the whistle, and there's only negative consequences, it is your full right to decide not to blow the whistle. Okay. There's nothing that forces you that says you must. The laws are there to protect you, to say that we like you to do so, and we will protect you if you do so. But there's no law that says you must. So I want to make it very clear here. Certain professional bodies require of you to uphold certain ethical standards. So something like accountants, lawyers, and these sort of things. But I want to make it very clear here, guys. If you are going to suffer harm from a process that is not going to have an outcome, then don't feel obligated. Don't feel a duty that it is something that you must still do. That is this dilemma that I've spoken about. So most whistleblowing advisors who I have spoken about, the first thing that they ask is make sure that this is something that is real and that the company will or can address. Don't initiate a process that is going to give you consequences that is harmful if it is highly unlikely that anything will be done about it or nothing can be done about it. Sometimes companies don't act because they want to hide from it. It's simply there's nothing to act upon. There's not enough evidence. There's not a case to be built. And if that is the case, if you can't prove something in court for that, for a lack of a better description, you may just end up doing harm, and there's nothing to the benefit of society that will happen. Okay. I think those are all the questions. Yes, I think so. Or is it,
There we go.
Yes. Oh, there's one or two more, but I think we've run out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating topic, Brett. And I mean, I'm sure we could, we could really carry on for the remainder of this day. But we really want to just sincerely appreciate, thank you so much. There's so much food for thought. All of us in this virtual auditorium have got so much to take away. And I think we're all inspired anew to make the topic of whistleblowing again more prominent in our dialogue, in our organizations, in our companies, in our communities, and wherever we socialize and engage with other people. I mean, sometimes you feel kind of, so alone, and when you have the urge and you don't know, should I, shouldn't I want to, I know, but we know all of those kinds of things. So colleagues, I really recommend, and this talk is recorded, it has been recorded, and right after we're done, we will again share the link via the social channels, but a good thing to come back, watch again and reflect, because there's so much food for thought in here, and such valuable takeaways, guidance, advice, and so forth. So again, Brett, to you, a special thank you. And colleagues, for everyone that attended, thank you so much. We wish you all the best in your own challenges that you face wherever you are. I'm thinking of that one saying that's been attributed to Edmund Burke that said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, and may I add, for good women to do nothing.
Yeah.
So I want a whistleblower in my mind. It's when you watch a game of football or soccer, and when the referee blows that whistle, the game stops. Everything stops. So the whistleblower, I think, needs to be, instead of all the negativity that's been attached to it, but along with all that you've provided us, should be elevated and become more prominent. So thank you once again, colleagues. Wishing you all the best. And I would like to part ways with you with a reminder that tomorrow is beautiful, because you and I, people like Brett and others, we're going to make tomorrow beautiful. Thank you so much.